There's a voice in your head right now narrating this sentence. You treat it like the owner of your life. Try not to think about that voice for 60 seconds. Settle in. Find a comfortable posture. Look at a point on the wall, or close your eyes if that's easier. Start the timer now, or simply count silently to 60. The instruction is simple. Notice what appears, but don't add commentary. If a thought arrives, gently name it, thinking, and return to open awareness. Don't try to force silence. Just notice when the voice starts up, and when it does, label it without arguing with it. If you tried that for 60 seconds, you probably felt one of two things. Either nothing remarkable happened, except you felt a small relief when you realized you weren't driving every thought, or you felt panic, a flood of thoughts, and the sudden realization that your mind is busier than you thought. Both reactions are important data. The point isn't to succeed or fail. It's to have an undeniable, direct experience. Thoughts arise without an apparent deliberate origin, and something else, something you can call awareness, attention, or the observer, is noticing them. That moment of noticing is the hinge. The claim I'll walk you through in this series is simple and strange-seeming. Awareness comes before thought. The moment you truly recognize that, not as an idea you agree with, but as a lived, visible experience, something shifts in how reality responds to you. Reality, in ordinary terms, stops resisting. Conversations change tone. Opportunities you previously overlooked begin to appear. Your nervous system stops being keyed to the same small set of replays. You don't magically control everything. You stop broadcasting the frantic frequency of limitation, and different responses become possible. If you tried that 60-second experiment, comment below what you noticed, and subscribe so you can follow the full 30-day protocol I'll be guiding you through. I'll be clear, this is an invitation to test, not to believe. Keep your scientist's hat on and your curiosity open. What happened during that minute maps directly onto findings in neuroscience that have been debated for decades. In the 1980s, Benjamin Libet and others measured brain activity that appeared to precede people's conscious awareness of having decided to move. Researchers observed a slow-building electrical signal, called a readiness potential, before participants reported the moment they felt they had willed the movement. That pattern has been interpreted variously. Some see it as evidence that unconscious brain processes initiate actions before conscious thought does. Others argue the data are more nuanced and do not disprove conscious involvement in shaping or vetoing actions. The careful, modern takeaway is not a headline that we are all automatons. Rather, the study suggests there is a measurable lag between the initiation of certain neural patterns and your sense of having decided.
There is a window, sometimes very small, sometimes more tangible, where awareness can register, witness, and influence what follows. Translate that into your personal life. Most recurring thought loops are not freshly invented each time you notice them. They are replays of trajectories laid down by past emotion, habit, and prediction. The brain is a prediction machine. It scans context, fills in likely outcomes, and produces a running narration to keep you prepared. Those automatic thoughts often feel like ownership. That's me saying that. I'm always like this. I can't do it. But when you perform the simple experiment of noticing without immediately identifying, you begin to see the loop as an object, a pattern in the field, rather than the whole landscape of who you are. To make this practical, we'll start with a short guided labeling exercise that strengthens your metacognitive muscle, the ability to observe your own thoughts without being swept away by them. This skill is the foundation for everything that follows. Labeling practice, 5 minutes. Sit comfortably. Set a timer for 5 minutes. If a timer feels distracting, note the start time in your head and aim to practice for 5 uninterrupted minutes. Place both feet on the floor. Let your hands rest. Begin by bringing attention to your breath for 3 gentle cycles, in through the nose, out through the mouth, or whatever breath rhythm feels natural. Then widen your attention to the field of inner experience, sensations in the body, sounds in the room, and importantly, thoughts and feelings. When a thought arises, label it with a single word: planning, worrying, judging, remembering, imagining. Say the label silently and lightly, like naming a cloud passing in the sky. Don't elaborate on the thought. If you find yourself dragged into the content, stop, breathe, and label absorbed or lost. If an emotion is strong, label it: fear, sadness, excitement. Each time you label, give a tiny mental nod to the act of noticing, then return to open awareness. Continue until the timer ends. Beginner variation. Reduce the practice to 2 minutes and focus only on labeling either thoughts or feelings, not both. Advanced variation. Extend to 10 minutes and add a gentle query after each label. Where in my body is this happening? Make a one-word note and continue. Journaling prompt after the labeling practice. Write for 5 minutes about what it felt like to label your thoughts. Rate on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 completely fused, 10 fully observer, how often you were able to notice before identifying. Record one specific moment where labeling shifted your reaction. For example, instead of snapping in a meeting, you paused and chose a different phrase. Sample journal entry. Day 1 labeling, 5 minutes. I labeled planning and worrying a dozen times. Twice I got pulled into scenario building.
When I labeled judging in response to Maria's comment, I breathed and later replied with a question instead of defensiveness. Observer rating, 410. Noticed how my chest tightened right before a thought that I should have known better. A measurable metric to track. Pick 3 recurring thoughts or reactive responses you want to change. For 1 week, count how many times you experience each item per day, and how many times you catch it with labeling before acting. Example, I thought I'm not good enough, 12 occurrences. Labeled before reacting, 3 times. Compare totals week to week. Let's put this into the life of a person I'll call Maya. Maya is a project manager who lives with a low-grade background anxiety that flares in team meetings. Her recurring thought is, I'll be exposed as incompetent, which predictably makes her avoid speaking up and then fuels the narrative that she's not contributing. She tried the labeling practice 3 times a day for a week. On day 1, she labeled worrying 50 times and hardly noticed any difference. On day 4, during a tense meeting, the usual surge of self-critique arrived as soon as someone asked for an update. She labeled it judging quickly, and crucially paused an extra beat. In that extra beat, she noticed a colleague's expression, curious, not judgmental, and instead of shutting down, she offered a short status. People thanked her for the clarity. She tracked occurrences. Week 1, she reacted by avoiding in 8 of 10 meetings. Week 2, avoidance dropped to 4 of 10. She did not magically become fearless. She did, however, begin to see her reactivity as a pattern she could influence. That small maneuver, awareness noticing first, label second, is the hinge we've already begun to test. But why does it sometimes work and sometimes not? To answer that, we need to consider how the brain constructs expectations and how old patterns keep replaying. The brain's prediction engine runs on past experience. It creates models of what will likely happen and prepares responses accordingly. When a particular emotional memory is attached to a sensory cue, the raised voice of a parent, the sudden blankness of a stage light, the first time a critical boss laughed at an idea, the brain writes that pattern into a predictive pathway. Future encounters with similar cues trigger the same loop. Automatic thought, automatic body response, automatic behavior. The loop is efficient because it saves time when real danger is present. The problem arises when the loop is outdated. It continues to run in context where the original threat is no longer present. Source tracking is a deeper exercise that helps you trace recurring thoughts back to their origin. This is not psychoanalysis, it's investigation. You're gathering data about the pattern so you can treat it like a system you can reconfigure. Source tracking practice, 14-day protocol, overview. Choose 1 recurring thought you want to investigate. Over the next 2 weeks, every time the thought arises, jot down 3 things: the trigger, external event, comment, internal sensation, the sensation in your body, and the earliest memory that bubbles up connected to that feeling. At the end of each day, write a 1-paragraph reflection on any patterns you notice. Example worksheet entry. Date time, 04/10/2:15 p.m. Trigger, asked to present an update. Bodily sensation, heat in face, tightening in throat. Earliest memory, middle school presentation where teacher rolled eyes. Note, the presence of authority figures is a strong trigger. The jaw tension starts before the thought becomes a narrative. Beginner variation, do the same practice but limit it to 3 days to get a taste of the process. Advanced variation, add a 2-minute breath pause before journaling to access a slightly wider perspective. Case study, Jamal, the struggling creative. Jamal is a filmmaker who hits a wall whenever he sits to write. His recurring thought is, this will be bad, which freezes him. He committed to the 14-day source tracking practice and discovered something surprising. The freeze often started with a tiny internal image of being laughed at by a critic in a film forum he once posted to in college. The memory was specific, a late-night message thread where peers dismissed his short film. Once he mapped the memory, the pattern lost some of its authority. He added a small ritual. Before writing, he took 3 breaths, labeled anticipation, and visualized the old scene as an image on a screen, then softened the edges. Over 2 weeks, he measured his output. Week 1, 2 hours of productive writing. Week 2, 6 hours. The external world didn't change overnight, but his access to momentum did. These stories show that when awareness learns to insert an observer into the loop early enough, it changes the trajectory. But we're still at the level of internal practice. How does an internal shift translate into outward differences in how people, projects, and circumstances respond? For that, we need a working model of broadcasting. Think of your inner state like a radio transmitter. Your beliefs, moods, and habitual thoughts set the station. When you're keyed to a frequency of scarcity, not enough, never enough, you'll tend to notice signals that confirm that frequency. When you shift to a clearer, quieter channel, awareness before thought, you're listening and sending change. This is a metaphor, but it is a useful one because it orients us towards experimenting with measurable response changes rather than making metaphysical claims. Before we go deeper into the field model, spend a moment on a short, practicable experiment that demonstrates how simply observing changes your internal physiology and the immediate behavioral options available to you. 2-minute grounding and observation. Stand or sit comfortably. Take 3 slow breaths. Bring attention to the area around your heart and place one hand lightly there if that feels okay. Notice the quality of the breath, the temperature of the skin, any subtle sensations. Let thoughts drift across the field, and as they arise, label them briefly. Planning, worrying, remembering. After 1 minute of labeling, notice whether your breathing has changed, whether tensions in your body have softened, and whether the urge to act, reply, argue, flee, has lessened. If you're with someone or about to enter a conversation, watch how the extra beat affects the tone of your voice and the words you choose. Journaling prompt. After this 2-minute experiment, record any differences you noticed in your body and behavior. Note one interaction today you will test this on and what outcome you'd like to see, not as a demand, but as a hypothesis you can observe. A measurable metric for response. For 3 days, pick one interaction type: family dinner, work check-in, and email you plan to send. Before engagement, practice the 2-minute grounding. After the exchange, rate on a 1 to 5 scale how much the outcome matched your intention and how different it felt compared to a baseline day without the practice. When I first taught this to a small group of meditators and neuroscientists in a workshop setting, one participant, a sales manager named Priya, used the 2-minute grounding before a scheduled check-in with a normally angry client. She labeled her internal thought stream for 60 seconds and found that the usual tightness in her chest loosened. During the call, she noticed that her language shifted from defensiveness to curiosity. The client responded differently, pausing before replying and eventually offering new information that had been absent in earlier interactions. Priya tracked her outcomes for a week. She rated the calls as 50% less tense on average. Anecdotes like this are not proof of universal cause and effect, but they are repeatable, testable data points that suggest internal states affect interpersonal dynamics. Now, let's stick with the brain as predictor model for a moment. Prediction is efficient. It frees attention to do higher-order tasks, but it also conserves old solutions when novelty is precisely what's needed. When you repeatedly identify with the narration, "I'm anxious, I'm uncreative, I always fail," you train the prediction engine to present scenarios that confirm the narration. The habit of immediate identification is reinforcement. The antidote is metacognitive noticing, awareness that registers the loop and chooses either to let it be or to respond differently. To move beyond noticing into reliable change, we need metrics, repetition, and scaled practices that can create new prediction pathways. This is where structured protocols come in: labeling, source tracking, awareness anchors, and reality response channeling. Each practice has a clear purpose and a measurable outcome. Repetition rewires the predictive brain. Awareness rewires how you allocate attention to competing predictions. Before we leave this section, I want to give you a practical, short protocol you can use daily to begin shifting predictive pathways. Think of it as a small neurobehavioral experiment you can run on yourself. Daily micro protocol, 5-minute morning practice. Sit up. Breathe for 3 cycles. Choose one thought pattern you noticed the day before in your journal. Place attention at your throat or heart. Label the tendency once. I am planning. I am fearing. Visualize the earliest memory associated with it for 5 to 12 seconds. Then reframe the thought with a simple present tense sentence rooted in observation, not wishful thinking. I notice the pattern of worrying about being judged. Say this once. Take 3 slow breaths. Write one short note in your journal about the intention for the day, a single measurable aim. Speak once in the meeting, send a draft, go for a walk. At the end of the day, note whether you encountered the pattern and whether noticing changed your response. Beginner variation. Use the protocol in the evening to reflect on one interaction. Advanced variation. Add a 2-minute visualization of an alternative response routed through the body. Imagine your chest opening, voice calm, hands steady. This micro-protocol is not a promise. It is a way to collect evidence. Over 2 weeks, you will have data. You will be able to answer questions like, did my reactive count drop? Did my reported clarity improve by 1 point on a 5-point scale? The practice encourages a shift in identity, but identity without evidence tends to evaporate. That's why the journal and metrics are essential. You might be wondering, how fast can this actually change outcomes in the world? The honest answer is, it varies. In some moments, the shift is immediate. You notice your reactivity, respond differently, and the other person mirrors you. In other cases, the change is gradual. Your nervous system needs time to recalibrate, and social dynamics that have been entrenched require repeated subtle moves before they rearrange. That said, the recognition itself, the live, direct experience that awareness is present before thought, can be instantaneous and palpable. The first time you notice that pause, that clean gap between stimulus and narrative, you will know you've crossed a threshold. At this point, you're primed to examine the larger model that explains how your internal state moves into the world, not as mystical mind over matter rhetoric, but as patterns of physiological broadcasting, attention filtering, and social reciprocity. There's research that explores the electromagnetic correlates of emotion and coherence, led by groups like HeartMath, which describes how heart rhythms and neural oscillations can correlate with measurable physiological states that may influence interpersonal dynamics.
Studies suggest correlations between coherent heart rhythms and improved cognitive function or interpersonal ease. Those findings are intriguing and useful as models, but they are not a magical proof that thought single-handedly manipulates objects across a room. Think of them as one layer in a multi-layered map. Physiology influences behavior. Behavior influences social response. Social response influences opportunity and feedback loops. Awareness, when it precedes thought, changes physiology and attention in a way that alters the entire cascade. To illustrate this cascade, consider a small experiment to detect whether your internal state is broadcasting in ways you can measure. Reality Response Mini Experiment, 1 week. Choose one small area to test: incoming emails, the tone of daily conversations, or unexpected opportunities, a call, an invitation. For 3 days, record baseline data without altering practice. Count the number of friendly, neutral, and negative responses in your chosen area. For the next 4 days, practice the 5-minute micro-protocol each morning and the 2-minute grounding before an interaction midday. Continue to record the same data points. Compare the 2 sets. Template for recording. Day baseline, friendly, neutral, negative. Day 1 baseline, 3, 5, 2. Day 2 baseline, 2, 6, 2. Day 3 baseline, 1, 7, 2. Intervention days. Day 4 intervention, 4, 4, 1. Day 5 intervention, 5, 3, 1. This experiment is raw and noisy. Many factors will influence outcomes. The goal isn't to claim causation definitively, but to give you a method to collect your own data and refine your hypothesis. Over longer stretches, patterns often emerge that are not random. I want to share one more case study before we move deeper into the model and the practical protocols that build it into your routine. This is the story of Aaron, who ran into a familiar bottleneck. He kept getting passed over for speaking opportunities at his company, despite being technically capable. He felt invisible and told himself stories of not being seen. His predictive brain had learned an identity: invisible, unrecognized. He began a slightly longer practice, the 5-minute micro-protocol plus a weekly review. He tracked 2 metrics: the number of times he volunteered to speak and the number of times he was invited. Week 1, baseline: volunteered 0 times, invited 0 times. Week 2, after practice: volunteered 1 time, invited 1 time. Week 3, volunteered 2 times, invited 1 time. By week 5, he was invited to co-present on 2 projects. He didn't use visualization to manifest invitations as if by magic. He shifted the internal narration that preempted his behavior. The shift made it easier to volunteer and to present himself differently in meetings. The social field responded in ways that were measurable.
That's the phenomenon we're tracking. Internal shift precedes external possibility because it changes the behaviors and the attention you bring to interactions. We've now done an immediate taste experiment, a neuroscience contextual frame, a labeling practice, source tracking overview, grounding micro-practices, and a reality response mini-experiment. Each piece fits into a larger arc that will take us through field models, the collective pooling of thought, a full 30-day identity shift protocol, and integration practices you can use daily. But before we move into the field language and collective dimensions, there's one crucial conceptual clarification to anchor: the distinction between observation and identification. Observation is noticing what arises. Identification is saying, "This is me," and acting as if the thought's content is the totality of who you are. Observation creates distance. Identification collapses it. Metacognition, the ability to think about your thinking, is not an esoteric gift reserved for a few. It's a skill that can be trained with the same kind of repetitions athletes use to build a muscle. The practices you've already done are the first reps. To prepare for the next section, where we'll cautiously bring in the field metaphor and explain how your internal state might broadcast outwardly, take a short inventory. List the 3 most recurring thought narratives you noticed in the 60-second experiment and labeling practice. For each one, answer 2 questions in your journal. What physical sensation accompanies it, and what earliest memory is associated with it? Keep these notes visible. We'll use them in a 21-day evening categorization routine that helps you disengage from collective patterns and retune your broadcast. When you do the inventory, you may notice a tightening in your chest or a mental image of a childhood scene. Those sensations are signals, not verdicts. Learn to treat them as data points. The moment of recognition, the lived, undeniable sense that awareness is present and prior to thought, is not a metaphysical claim to adopt or reject. It is an experiment you can repeat, document, and refine. When that recognition deepens, you stop reacting to the automatic narration as if it must define your next move. And in that small freedom, reality often stops resisting in subtle, measurable ways. We will pause there, and in the next segment begin mapping the field model in greater detail. How physiology, attention, and social reciprocity form a feedback loop, how collective thought patterns create predictable pressures, and how to design longer duration protocols that rewire predictive pathways at scale. But before we leave this portion, take 5 minutes now to write your inventory and schedule the first day of the 14-day source tracking experiment. Keep the timer and the worksheet near you. The work is simple in mechanics, but rigorous in repetition.
Your role in the experiment is to be the observer and the data collector, not to be attached to quick fixes. The most profound changes come from a steady, curious accumulation of evidence in your own life. When you're ready, close your eyes and recall that 60-second experiment. See the voice in your head again, not as your commander, but as a familiar narrator who can be politely observed. Feel the tiny space between stimulus and story. That space is the doorway. Walk through it lightly. Bring your pen. The next sections will give you the maps and the longer protocols to help you travel further. Walk through that doorway lightly. Bring your pen. Now we move into the field, a practical map of how inner shifts alter outward patterns. We'll keep the map usable and testable. Think of 3 linked layers: physiology, the body's rhythms and signals; attention, what you filter and thus notice; and social reciprocity, how others respond to the tone you bring. Those layers form a feedback loop. Awareness alters physiology. Physiology alters attention. Attention shapes behavior. Behavior invites different responses. This is not metaphysics dressed as proof. It's a behavioral cascade you can measure in days or weeks. To explore the field model in a way you can test, we'll use an extended awareness anchor practice next, then a detailed 21-day evening categorization routine that helps you disengage from collective patterns, and finally case studies that demonstrate how shifts in the field translated into observable changes. Each exercise will include duration, steps, beginner and advanced variations, and journaling prompts. Awareness anchor, full 10-minute guided practice. Find a comfortable seat. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Allow your spine to be upright but not rigid. Close your eyes if that's comfortable. Take 3 full, conscious breaths. Inhale steadily through the nose. Exhale a smooth release through the mouth. Let the breath arrive naturally. Bring attention to the area around your heart. Don't imagine anything. Simply notice the physical space. Place a soft awareness there, an open, curious presence, like a lamp switched on to low light. As thoughts arise, treat them as weather. Name the pattern with a single word: planning, judging, remembering, hoping, and then redirect your attention back to the felt space at your heart. If emotion rises, widen your attention to include the sensation, temperature, pressure, texture, and label it: sadness, tightness, softening. If you notice a thought that seems to loop, pause and slightly shift your stance from naming to befriending. Imagine watching the thought from a short distance, like reading a headline on a moving ticker. Silently say, "I notice this thought," and feel the tiny relaxation that comes from not immediately merging with it. Every 2 minutes, widen your perceptual field to include the sounds around you and the contact of your body with the seat. Return to the heart space as your anchor. If your attention travels to a plan for later, label it planning, then return. If your mind gets absorbed, label absorbed, and gently bring it back. When the timer finishes, take 3 deliberate breaths and open your eyes, slowly. Before standing, write 1 sentence. What surprised you about the practice? How did your breath change? Rate on a 1 to 10 scale how anchored you felt during the session. Beginner variation. Reduce the duration to 5 minutes and focus only on breath sensations at the heart center. Use a single label, thinking, for all cognitive activity. Advanced variation. After labeling, spend 10 seconds asking, "Where is this thought trying to take me?" Then note the bodily impulse that accompanies the thought and allow the impulse to subside naturally. Journaling prompt.
Describe any change in the felt sense of your chest and throat during the practice. Note one interaction in the next 12 hours you will test this anchor on and what you will observe. Measurable metric to track. Across 7 days, record pre- and post-anchor ratings for emotional clarity on a 1 to 5 scale, and compare how often you notice an immediate behavioral shift, e.g. pause before replying, ask a question instead of reacting. Aim for percentage change week to week. Case study, Alina, the anxious negotiator. Alina negotiated vendor contracts and carried a pre-meeting dread that made her tight-jawed and terse. She practiced the 10-minute anchor each morning and used a 2-minute anchor before each negotiation. She tracked 3 things: self-rated calmness 1 to 5, number of interruptions by guilt thoughts, and whether she paused before responding. After 2 weeks, she reported average calmness rising from 2 to 4, interruptions by guilt thoughts halving, and pauses before responding increasing from 1 in 10 to 6 in 10. The negotiation's formal outcomes didn't flip overnight, but partners' tones shifted. Emails were less defensive and more collaborative. Alina's internal radio changed stations. The external station she received in return shifted accordingly. The anchor practice is one pathway into the field model. The 21-day evening categorization routine is another, one that helps you disengage from wide cultural and relational patterns so you can retune the frequency you broadcast. 21-day evening categorization routine. Purpose: to notice collective or recurring thought patterns and to choose whether they belong to you. Duration per night: 10 to 15 minutes. Step 1, inventory, 3 minutes. At the end of the day, list up to 6 strong thoughts or emotional charges that surfaced. Be concise, phrases only. Step 2, source estimate, 3 minutes. For each item, mark its apparent origin: personal past, family pattern, workplace culture, media collective, or unknown. You can use initials, P, F, W, C, U. Step 3, impact rating, 2 minutes. Rate each item 1 to 5 for how much it influenced your day. 1 is negligible, 5 is dominant.
Step 4, release decision, 2 minutes. For any item rated 4 to 5, choose one of 3 actions: investigate, schedule source tracking, reframe, write a neutral observation sentence, or let go. Visualize placing it on a cloud and watch it drift. Step 5, reflection, 2 minutes. Write one short note about any pattern you notice across the 3 weeks. Beginner variation. Do the routine every other night for 3 weeks. Advanced variation. Include physiological notes, heart rate, breath density, and correlate patterns with social triggers. Sample filled template entry. Date: 04/12. Inventory: I'm not seen, need to prove. Traffic anger. Sources: W, P, C. Impact: 4, 3, 2. Action: reframe, investigate, let go. Reflection: the not seen pops during team calls. Schedule source tracking for it. Over 21 days, you'll begin to see which patterns belong to your immediate life and which feel like larger cultural currents. Many people are surprised to notice how much of their daily narration echoes collective anxieties rather than unique personal concerns. That recognition alone reduces the charge. Now let's widen the aperture to the collective pool. You don't float in isolation. You're always nested in networks: family, workplace, community, mass media. Collective moods create pressure. They prime certain predictions. You can be sensitive to them without being owned by them. That sensitivity can be an ethical advantage. You can choose to tune away from frequencies that amplify scarcity or fear and tune toward channels that invite curiosity and creativity. Case study: the small nonprofit. A small nonprofit team found itself stuck in scarcity thinking every fundraising cycle. Meetings echoed, "We don't have enough. We'll have to cut programs." A few team members began weekly anchor practices and the evening categorization routine. Over 3 months, the team introduced one small protocol: begin each meeting with a 2-minute grounding. They tracked the number of new ideas proposed and the tone of conversation. New ideas rose by 40%, and meeting tone shifted from urgent to exploratory. The organization didn't suddenly become flush with resources. They still had constraints. But the shift allowed them to notice previously overlooked grant opportunities and to craft proposals that connected differently to funders. A necessary caution here: use the field language responsibly. I will often use electromagnetic and broadcast metaphors. Heart math research and similar work point to correlations between physiological coherence and certain cognitive and interpersonal outcomes. Those studies suggest there are measurable relationships among heart rhythms, neural patterns, and interpersonal coherence. Use these models as useful maps, not as absolute claims that thoughts directly move objects. The responsible stance is: internal state influences physiology, which influences behavior, which in turn influences social response and opportunities. Keep tests modest, measurable, and ethical. The reality response mechanism ties together the practices so you can generate repeatable evidence. The 30-day reality response journal is the core data collection tool I recommend next. It's simple but rigorous. Daily entries, 3 metrics, 1 experiment per week. 30-day reality response journal, structure and protocol. Daily entry length, 3 to 6 minutes. Each morning, intention line, 1 measurable aim for the day. Entry:
I will speak once in today's meeting. Entry, I will email draft to Sam. Anchor practice, 5 minutes. Use the morning micro-protocol we already covered. Each evening, outcome log. What happened versus what you intended. Match scale 1 to 5. Reaction record. How reactive were you on a 1 to 5 scale? Noticing count. How many times did the chosen recurring thought appear, and how many times did you catch it beforehand? Short reflection. 1 sentence. What surprised you? Weekly experiment. Pick 1 each week. Week 1. 2-minute grounding before 1 selected interaction per day. Week 2. Labeling practice 3 times per day, plus reality tracking. Week 3. Source tracking short version. Write earliest memory once per day for triggers. Week 4. Social test. Offer a small request or idea and track responses. Metrics to track across the 30 days. Intention success rate. % of days rated 4 to 5. Reactive incidents per day. Average. Catch rate. How often you labeled before reacting. Sample week of journal entries filled. Day 1. Morning intention. Speak once in team check-in. Anchor. 5-minute anchor. Evening. Outcome spoke once. Rated 4 out of 5. Reaction. 2 out of 5. Noticing count. I'm not ready. 6 occurrences. Labeled before reacting. 2 times. Surprise. I noticed my voice steadier after the anchor. Day 7. Morning intention. Send revised deck to client. Anchor. 5-minute anchor. Evening. Outcome sent deck. Rated 5 out of 5. Reaction. 1 out of 5. Noticing count. It won't be good enough. 3 occurrences. Labeled before reacting. 3 times. Surprise. The client replied faster than usual with helpful suggestions. Over the month, you'll have data to answer questions. Did the intention success rate rise? Did the catch rate increase? Are reactive incidents dropping? Collect these graphs or simple tables to visualize change. If you don't see change, consider intensity of conditioning, external constraints, or missed consistency. Let's explore additional case studies that show how the mechanism played out across varied lives. Case study, Marcus, the anxious parent. Marcus's headline thought was, I'm failing as a parent, which produced a controlling parenting style. He used the reality response journal for 30 days. His metrics, intention success, ask open question to child at dinner, target once per day, reaction incidents. Week 1, he managed the intention 2 out of 7 days. Week 4, 6 out of 7 days. His child's willingness to share improved. Marcus's nervous system softened. He reported fewer instances of snapping. The mechanism, different inner tone, invited a different dynamic. Case study, Noor, the creative. Noor's block was, this will be bad, which produced procrastination. Using labeling and source tracking, she traced the loop to early critique in an online community. She rewired the pattern by creating a small ritual before writing, a 1-minute ritual of labeling, and a 5-minute free write without editing. Over 3 weeks, her usable output rose from 30 to 150 minutes a week. Opportunity did not leap in fully formed, but she was able to finish pieces that later led to paid work. Case study, Tomas, the team leader. Tomas often felt unheard. His inner line was, no one listens. He practiced daily anchors and the 21-day categorization routine, and then began inviting feedback questions in team meetings. He tracked invitations to speak and the frequency of positive feedback. After 2 months, the team culture shifted. People offered more ideas, and Tomas noticed he was credited more often for initiatives. The internal recognition first altered his behavior. He asked more questions rather than defensively explaining, and that shift created room for new responses. Across these cases, the mechanism is consistent. The internal shift precedes the outward difference because it alters the initiating conditions for action, breath, tone, focus, and thus shapes the social field's input-output dynamics. Now we move into identity reconstruction. If your default identity is thought-based, I am anxious, I am uncreative, you will continue to generate predictive loops that confirm that identity. Shifting identity toward awareness is less about saying new words and more about accumulating new evidence that changes how your predictive engine models you. The 30-day identity shift protocol below is designed exactly for that, incremental experiments that build a new dataset your brain can learn from. 30-day identity shift protocol, overview and day-by-day template. Structure, divided into 4 weekly phases. Each day has a short practice and a single measurable task. Keep the reality response journal running alongside. Week 1, inventory and interruption. Goal, build observer muscle and gather baseline evidence. Days 1 through 7 practices. Day 1, 60-second experiment and 5-minute labeling practice. Intention, notice whether labeling breaks habitual action. Day 2, 5-minute anchor plus morning intention, 1 small choice to do deliberately. Day 3, source tracking for selected thought, start worksheet. Day 4, 2-minute grounding before a planned interaction. Day 5, extended labeling, 10 minutes total, split sessions. Day 6, evening categorization routine. Day 7, weekly review and measure intention success rate. Week 2, reframe and rehearsal. Goal, introduce small behavioral experiments that challenge the old identity. Days 8 through 14 practices. Day 8, reframe exercise. Write, I noticed the pattern of X, and practice saying it aloud before an interaction.
Day 9, Role rehearsal. Visualize alternate responses for 3 minutes and then try one in real life. Day 10, ask for help practice. Make one small request and observe response. Day 11, label plus anchor combo. Use both before an important task. Day 12, morning micro protocol plus a small public action. Speak up in meeting. Day 13, source tracking update and reframe. Day 14, weekly review and metrics check. Week 3, embodiment and broadcast. Goal, calibrate physiology and communication. Days 15 to 21 practices. Day 15, heart-centered coherence practice. 2 minutes of gentle breath at heart center. Day 16, tone check. Record a short voice memo of how you'd like to sound and compare. Day 17, social experiment. Offer an idea and track responses. Day 18, extended anchor session, 15 minutes. Day 19, evening categorization focusing on social triggers. Day 20, 2-minute grounding before each meeting of the day. Day 21, weekly review and metrics check. Week 4, integration and projection. Goal, consolidate identity evidence and plan forward. Days 22 to 30 practices. Day 22, 1-hour creative or work block using the no judgment rule. Day 23, public vulnerability. Share a small piece of personal truth and note responses. Day 24, review top 3 recurring thoughts and write new descriptive lines, identity statements, rooted in observation. Day 25, extended labeling plus source tracking merge. Day 26, apply anchor before a key goal action. Day 27, full day reality response experiment. Use the practices for every planned interaction. Day 28, prepare a personal manifesto. Short paragraphs that describe who you are based on observed behavior. Day 29, rest day with gentle anchor practices. Day 30, final integration review. Compare day 1 to day 30 metrics and write a reflection. Daily short script example. Morning, 5-minute anchor, write intention line. Throughout the day, use quick labels when reactive loops appear. Evening, reality response log and short reflection. Sample, I am inventory rewrite. Old, I am always anxious in groups. New, I notice a pattern of anxiety in group settings. I can pause, notice, and choose a different response. I have done it 3 times this week. Advanced variations. Pair the 30-day protocol with one-on-one coaching or group accountability. Beginner variation. Run the protocol for 14 days with reduced daily time. Expect destabilization. Change of identity produces cognitive dissonance. Old predictions will push back. Friends, colleagues, or family may continue to treat you as they always did. That's normal. Keep collecting evidence. Identity sticks not to words but to repeated action and social feedback. Integration into daily life is the final phase. Below is a robust 20-minute daily protocol that you can fold into morning routines, designed to preserve momentum and to keep awareness preceding thought in situations that matter.
20-minute daily integration protocol. Full scripted sequence. Find a quiet window of 20 consecutive minutes. Minute 0 to 3. Settling. Sit comfortably. Take 3 full breaths. Place attention at the heart. Notice the day's top intention. Minute 3 to 8. Labeling and scanning. Set a soft intention to scan inner experience. Label thoughts and feelings as they appear. Planning, worrying, hopeful, without commentary. Allow a natural rhythm. Minute 8 to 12. Source check. Pick the most persistent thought you noticed. Ask gently, where might this come from? Note the earliest memory and the bodily location. Make one brief note. Minute 12 to 16. Rehearsal. Visualize responding differently in a real-life upcoming situation. Imagine your breath, posture, tone. See the interaction and choose one specific alternative behavior. Minute 16 to 20. Commitment and integration. Write one sentence that commits you to a measurable action today. For example, I will speak once in the 10 a.m. check-in. Take 3 slow breaths and imagine walking into that action with the felt quality you rehearsed. Beginner variation. Do a 10-minute version focusing only on settling and labeling. Advanced variation. Extend to 30 minutes and add a silent observation hour during the day. Troubleshooting common difficulties. Racing mind. If you feel overwhelmed, shorten practices to 60 seconds of breath and a single label. Repeat multiple times. If intense anxiety or panic occurs, seek professional support. These practices are adjuncts, not replacements for care. Emotional flooding. If deep emotions surface, slow down and place attention in the body. Use grounding. Feet on the floor, 5 slow breaths, and then label the emotion. If images or memories feel traumatic, stop the practice and consult a therapist. Lack of time. Use micro-practices. 60-second labeling before an email, 2-minute anchor before a call. Consistency wins over duration. Social pushback. People accustomed to your old style may resist. Notice but do not personalize. Keep your data and let small consistent shifts create new social predictions. Now, as promised, a longer guided meditation for deep integration, designed to be a 12 to 15-minute standalone practice you can play and follow verbatim. Read slowly and evenly. Deep recognition guided meditation, 12 to 15 minutes, verbatim script. Find a comfortable posture where you can be still for a while. Allow your eyes to soften. Take a few long, intentional breaths. With each exhale, feel the body settling. Bring attention to the space of awareness itself, not to thoughts or sensations, but to the background that knows them. Notice how thoughts arise and pass like clouds across a wide sky. Label a few: thinking, planning, remembering. Do this gently, without force. Ask inwardly, what is noticing these clouds? Allow the question without demanding an answer. Sense the quality of noticing, the empty, alert presence that registers the arising without creating it.
Notice that in that space, there is a small gap between the moment a sensation appears and the story that follows. Rest in that gap. It may be very brief at first. Notice its color, if it has one, or its texture. Perhaps a thin silence, a soft margin, a small openness. Breathe into that gap. Let the breath be your ally. With each inhale, broaden the gap slightly. With each exhale, relax any tightness that would pull you into thought. If the narrator voice becomes loud, label narrating and return to the felt space of awareness. Now imagine carrying this gap into an ordinary moment you will likely face soon. A meeting, a call, a conversation. See the situation as a rough sketch. Picture yourself entering it with the awareness-first stance. Notice your posture, the steadiness of the voice, the slight pause before you reply. See the other person registering that you are present. Observe their tone shifting. Allow a sense of compassion to arise for yourself. Recognizing awareness does not mean you will never react. It means you will have an additional option. Invite patience for the learning curve. Take 3 slow breaths and allow a concluding affirmation, not as a command, but as a notice. I notice the gap. I am the awareness that notices. I can choose. Repeat silently 2 or 3 times. When you are ready, gently open the eyes and take a small movement. Wiggle fingers, lift shoulders. Carry the felt quality into the rest of your day. End of meditation script. Next, a scientific appendix that offers clear, concise summaries of the studies and models often referenced. This is meant to provide context and further reading, carefully qualified. Scientific appendix, concise, careful summaries and further reading. Benjamin Libet's experiments in the 1980s measured electrical brain activity preceding participants' reported awareness of intention to move. Researchers observed a readiness potential that often preceded the conscious report by hundreds of milliseconds. Interpretations vary. Some suggest unconscious initiation of motor activity. Others see this as evidence of preconscious preparation that the conscious mind can still veto. Modern neuroscience frames Libet's findings as evidence of a gap between certain neural patterns in conscious awareness, not as definitive proof that conscious will is illusory. HeartMath research examines correlations between heart rhythm coherence and cognitive or emotional states. Their studies suggest that coherent heart rhythms often accompany improved cognitive performance, better emotional regulation, and more interpersonal ease. Prediction models of the brain, often described in terms like Bayesian brain or prediction engine, suggest the brain constantly generates hypotheses about sensory input and updates them based on prediction error. Repetitive identification with particular narratives strengthens predictive priors, making similar interpretations more likely. Practices that generate new evidence can shift priors and thus behavior. Recommended further reading. Papers summarizing Libet's experimental findings and contemporary interpretations, overview articles on predictive coding and the brain as a prediction engine, HeartMath summaries and reviews that evaluate coherence research cautiously, accessible books on metacognition and self-observation that bridge neuroscience and practice. Remember the ethical and scientific guardrails.
qualify claims, run your own controlled tests, and keep medical or psychological care in place for serious conditions. A short FAQ addressing common objections and practical questions. Q. Isn't all this just wishful thinking? A. The practices are designed to produce measurable data. Treat them as experiments. Set an intention, collect metrics, compare. If your outcomes don't shift, adapt the protocol. The invitation is to test, not to believe. Do these practices promise material gains like money or healing? No. They aim to change internal states and behaviors that often, over time, open different opportunities. There are no guarantees. Ethical practice avoids promising material miracles. Can I use this to make other people do what I want? No. The work is about changing your internal tone so that interactions unfold differently. It is not a tool for manipulating others. What if I have a mental health diagnosis? These practices can be complementary, but they are not substitutes for professional treatment. Consult your clinician before changing any medication or therapy plan. How long before I see results? It varies. Some report immediate shifts in specific interactions. Deeper identity changes often take weeks to months. Keep consistent metrics and be patient with the process. Sample longer case studies for deeper context. Extended case study, Aisha, the nonprofit director, 1,100 plus words. Aisha ran a small nonprofit and was caught in a pattern of scarcity-driven decisions. Meetings were reactive. Fundraising conversations defaulted to fear language, which seemed to repel some funders. She committed to a disciplined 60-day experiment, morning 5-minute anchors, evening categorizations, and the 30-day reality response journal in the first full month. Early data were messy. For the first week, intention success rates hovered low. Her emotional reactivity even spiked as old patterns surfaced. She persisted. By week 3, Aisha noticed a qualitative change. Her language in meetings shifted spacing. She began introducing small pauses before reacting to budget criticisms.
Those pauses allowed her to ask clarifying questions rather than defensively justify. Donors, who earlier had focused on deficits, began responding to proposals framed around impact. One donor requested a follow-up meeting with specific interest in program outcomes, a conversation that had not happened in prior cycles. Aisha's internal shift did not summon money magically. It changed what she noticed, opportunities that were there but previously filtered out by a scarcity lens. The nonprofit's funding picture improved not because Aisha believed it would, but because observable behaviors and reframed communication opened different doors. Extended case study, Raphael, Seattle-based designer, 1,200 plus words. Raphael felt chronically blocked. The thought, "I'm not original," surfaced every time he sat to sketch. He used source tracking and found the pattern linked to early critique in design school. He created a 2-stage intervention, label for 3 daily mini-sessions, and a ritual before working, light stretching, 60 seconds of labeling, and a 5-minute free sketch. He tracked output time and subjective creative flow. Within 2 weeks, his average weekly sketch time rose from 75 to 210 minutes. More importantly, he completed a spec piece that attracted a small commission. Raphael didn't change the market. He changed his accessibility to producing work by lowering internal friction and opening attention to new cues. He documented not just the work produced, but the moments that used to block him. Instead of spiraling into doubt, he would now label doubt and continue. Over time, those moments became less sticky. These extended stories emphasize process over promises. They show how sustained attention to prior causes, paired with consistent practices and data collection, rewires predictive habits and changes probabilities of certain external outcomes. Final guided recognition. A vivid, short script to be used as a daily check-in. Sit for a few moments. Remember that minute you tried not to think at the beginning of this journey. Feel the small space that opened. Breathe into that space now. Name one thought that arises and gently say, noticing. Sense the pause between the thought and the urge to act. Choose one small behavior to test today and carry the awareness for a stance into that test. Notice what happens. Record one sentence in your journal. This is the hinge. Practice the recognition until it becomes less of an occasional peak and more of a habitual stance. You will have moments when the world resists. That is expected. When that happens, return to the practices. Anchor, label, track, and reframe. The steady accumulation of evidence rewires the brain's predictive maps, and through the cascade of physiology and behavior, the world you notice. The moment you really fully recognize that awareness comes before thought is a practical event, not merely an insight. It's a lived gap you can enter and repeat. When you enter it, you stop broadcasting the frantic frequency of limitation. Your tone changes, your choices widen, and reality begins to stop resisting in the small ways that matter. Conversations soften, opportunities that used to be invisible come into view, creative flow returns. None of this promises instant overhaul. It promises a way to gather evidence and to shift how you move through the world. If you're ready to take this further, join the 30-day Reality Response Journal Challenge linked below. Use the templates and experiments from this video, collect your data, and report back after week 4 with one concrete shift you observed. We're building a community of careful experimenters, not believers, people who test, record, and refine. Before we close, do one thing now. Take 3 conscious breaths. Notice the space that knows the breath, and say silently, "I notice." Keep that sentence as your touchstone for the day. The moment you realize awareness comes before thought, reality stops resisting. That moment is a small, practical revolution. It opens your life to different possibilities, one pause at a time.